Hello, everyone. My name is Joel McLeod.
I'm Roland,
and welcome to the Thursday 905 Roundup for the 905er podcast. We got a couple big things to talk about today. Roland, why don't you start us off with what's happening with Burlington City Council?
Yeah, I mean, it's there's been some grumbling going on for a few weeks, and I don't think we've mentioned it on the podcast up to now, but it's certainly been rumbling about. And the ironic thing is that the thing that's going to make us talk about it is the mayor's attempt to pour cold water on this story and to make it go away. And in doing it, she's now made it a huge story that we're not going to ignore,
No.
which tells its own story, you know. So for those people who don't live in Burlington or who don't follow the news as closely as some of us do, there was, coming out of the LGBTQ issues with the Catholic School Board, Burlington discussed expanding and accelerating its program of installing a number of rainbow crosswalks. So the first rainbow crosswalk went in just a year or 2 years ago. And I believe that the mayor, in essence, came forward with a proposal to put a crosswalk in every ward in the city, plus various other things. There was talk about benches. There was talk about a number of other things. Well, that's fine. There was a vote on that, and three councillors disagreed with the other four. Not so much, they certainly didn't oppose additional rainbow crosswalks. But,
let's clarify what the story was. The story was that it went to a vote to city about the crosswalks, and then the mayor posted on her Facebook page that the vote had passed 4-3. She named the councillors who sided with her in passing the painting the sidewalks colors of the pride flag, and there's a hint to that message of these four councillors are pro LGBTQ plus issues. The other three are not.
Yeah. And it was certainly interpreted that way by the public. I mean, this was a tweet that was sent out, and people immediately started responding to that tweet saying, you know, why is my councillor? And the three councillors who voted against the motion were Lisa Kearns from Ward 2, Shauna Stolte from Ward 3, and Paul Sharman from Ward 5. And the implication was that certain people read it that way as the implication that, you know, these guys are homophobic, basically,
right, and
are against everything that's happened with the LGBT community. Now, I mean, I have to say, from what I know of all three of them, and you know, I know the three of them to different degrees. That's just not my understanding of those people, and I don't think. Well, it was a very carelessly. The most generous interpretation of the tweet is it was very carelessly worded, but why would you even tweet that unless you're trying to kind of throw your colleagues under the bus? I mean, it was a very pointed comment, but it was very pointed by who it didn't mention and who it did mention, and it, you know, but Marianne Ward is not a naive media person. She knows exactly what she's doing. But
those three councillors later that day issued their own statement, which I thought that doesn't happen in Burlington, for councillors to issue their own statement to the press, in which they outlined their reasons why they voted against the motion, and it had nothing to do with LGBTQ plus rights or issues. All three declared their support for it. It was about funding for the project. It was about how were we going to budget this taxpayer initiative to do it. And basically their opposition was the fact that the mayor's proposal would mean dipping into the city's reserve funds as they saw it. And they thought we had a different proposal that might take a little bit longer, but it would basically budget out a different sidewalk each fiscal year, or maybe fiscal quarter, but it basically be, you know, we'd be able to budget for the project each year without having to raise taxes or having to dip into the emergency fund, which is meant for crisis and not operating costs, but just it's a rainy day fund.
Yeah, I mean, reserve funds are, so cities in Canada, or certainly in Ontario, can't go into debt, so that they, you know, there are no such thing as a deficit in a city. So they have to have reserve funds to cover for unexpected contingencies. Right now, we're in the middle of a big unexpected contingency, and that's when you need those kind of funds. But obviously, we've done so many episodes on this issue and how important it is to show solidarity with LGBTQ people. But at the same time, there's also the financial issues on how you find funds within the city system. As a side issue, they installed a sidewalk 2 years ago. I think, if I remember rightly, the numbers for installing the same crosswalk today was about 33% more than it was 2 years ago, and you're like, well, what does that? Well, the cost of these things is kind of astounding. But
we asked the city. I asked the city what's the delay, and they said it's hard to find the paint. The paint that if you think about it, like road paint, it really only comes in kind of two colors, yellow and white, right? So to go in and find the paint get the dyes for all it, again. This is where your idealism comes into the logistics of reality. Is that great? Yeah, that's a great project. We want to do it, but how? Right? And this stuff does cost money. I thought it was interesting was the fact that the opposite, the dissenting votes, I think do have a legitimate case, and they were showing responsibility to the taxpayer to say we've had an alternative method to show our solidarity in a more fiscally responsible manner. That I'm not going to speak for the LGBTQ plus community, but I think they would understand that. Yeah, I mean, we shouldn't go into debt for this, and nobody was flat out saying no, we should never do this at all.
And I suspect that this was the final instance in a chain. We're seeing the end of a chain here that isn't necessarily discussed in the newspapers. That there have been prior incidences of maybe the mayor and her supporters, let's just say, she has to do this with the votes of council. So, but the mayor with her particular supporters voting for financial spending that perhaps made some of the other councillors more easy. Certainly, Paul Sharman is in the kind of conservative spending end of the world, I don't think that's any secret to anybody. So I think this came and it was like, hey, hang on a minute, we've been kind of bounced into this, and do we really need to dip into reserve funds for this? Is it, can we achieve exactly the same ends, take an extra year or two and do the same thing? And that's also the next step in this whole saga is that Joan Little, who is a columnist for the Spectator, who writes basically the Burlington beat in the Spec, has done for many, many years, reported exactly these facts, which are there's clearly a divide because when the mayor says one thing and the councillors respond the same day with a fairly strongly worded rebuke. It said basically said that the mayor should, it'd be nice if the mayor was doing something more than just performative actions. That's kind of fighting talk right there. So all Joan Little did was report those facts. A week later, we have a pretty long op-ed from the mayor herself. So the headline on the piece in the Spectator from Mayor Mead Ward was "Inaccurate column did a disservice to Burlington councillors," and it starts off kind of saying, well, we don't expect unanimity in our council decisions, and a 4-3 vote is completely normal. True, quite true. And so it's trying to imply that there was no great discussion here, but then immediately goes on to kind of throw those same councillors under the bus again and say that their letter was full of inaccuracies. So I recognize these errors came from a statement on social media by several council members. She doesn't mention her own comment on social media, which caused this in the first place. So again, she's only telling one side of the story here. There's two sides. Whichever view you take of it, she's only putting one side. But she's now put herself into the story and made it much more meaty from the point of view of people wanting to cover the local news. And it's funnily enough, it's exactly the kind of thing that Marianne Mead Ward was criticising the previous mayor and council for in 2018, of people saying something in an article and getting like a mountain of people from City Hall piling onto them saying, you're not allowed to say that because it's inaccurate or it's terrible or it's wrong. Well, now she's doing exactly the same thing. So it's really, but it's a strange error of judgment in my view.
What struck me about this whole story is that it comes down to the mayor's actions. That okay, the council, the vote was passed. The councils they're going ahead and funding it a certain way. Instead of saying Burlington Council voted to install these pride sidewalks across the city, she turned it into a point of, I'm going to single out certain councillors on council for not siding with me. Now, she didn't name them by name, but she kind of named them through a mission that it's like, these are my people. Like, if you want to support, if you want to know who's on the side of LGBTQ plus community in Burlington, it's these people plus me. And yeah, I mean, I would be ticked off too if, like, you want to have. She turned the discussion away from a discussion about fiscal responsibility and how do we budget for this, which is not sexy and it's not glamorous and it's not, if anything, it's actually kind of the responsible thing of what government should be doing. She wanted to turn it into, instead of this rallying cry of, we're pro LGBTQ plus. I'll give her the credit. I'll give her the benefit of the doubt and say maybe that wasn't her intention. It was a careless slip. But the thing is, that you could have fixed that in so many ways by just going to the three other councillors and saying, yeah, you know what, we that wasn't my intention. I'm sorry, and doing it publicly. Instead, it's this whole. I don't want to. People are kind of calling me on it, and I don't want to own up to my own mistake. So it's making it worse.
Yeah, and it wasn't a mistake because she's now doubled and tripled down. And the thing is, she tries to have it both ways, because in the article, in the spec, she starts off saying there was an inaccurate letter posted on social media. Doesn't mention her own post on social media. Inaccurate letter from these three councillors. Then she goes on later in the article to say, I'm immensely proud of the careful thought and compassion that that's the councillors, bring to each discussion. We have votes in all kinds of directions. Well, yeah, that would be absolutely accurate and absolutely a fine description by a mayor of their council if you hadn't had the paragraph 3 paragraphs earlier that threw them under the bus again. And I mean, for people who've been involved in politics in Burlington for a while, this, I have to say, it's no great secret that this has been the reputation that the mayor has brought, that she is a tough cookie. I mean, these can all be admirable things in a politician. A tough cookie. She doesn't mess around. She doesn't take any prisoners. But she loses friends at a hell of a rate, is all I can say, as I've seen over the year. The people who have supported her, like you wouldn't believe, at earlier points in her career, are now upset with her for various reasons. And it's a characteristic that I don't think there's any danger that Marianne Meed Ward won't be mayor come 2023. I just can't imagine any situation in which someone comes out of the woodwork who runs against her and wins. However, in the longer term, we're starting to see Marianne Meed Ward's kind of warts and all, if you like. I think she's incredibly popular in Burlington. I mean, she's really a phenomenon in the city in terms of a mayor, and Burlington has not seen her like before, and that's just an absolute fact, whether you like Marianne, whether you don't, whatever you think.
But the trick is, though, Roland, you and I have seen politics at all levels, and when behavior like this becomes the norm, you start racking up enemies a lot quicker than you do friends. And it's sad that this has kind of come out in the public this way. I mean, kind of you keep your dirty laundry hidden behind closed doors so that it doesn't get aired this way. But I was just surprised, like, why would you throw these three councillors under the bus this way and the irony, and spark that division when, a simple, hey, you know what? Council voted in favor of this. Great. Let's move.
And I mean, the The huge irony, again, for people familiar with the last election, which again, full disclosure, I was involved in as well. Now, Paul Sharman's never been any great fan of Marianne's. He's from the previous council. He's the last remaining outpost of the old guard. So, the fact that he's at loggerheads with Marianne, no great surprise. The other two are Lisa Kearns, who was certainly, the perception was when she was elected that she was very much, from many people's perspective, I'm trying to put this in a way which doesn't sound like sour grapes from me, but many people felt that she was Marianne's choice. Actually, and I have to say here that Marianne never ever said that, and was very, very fair when multiple people were kind of running against each other in the same ward, both of whom she knew. So put that right out there. She was extremely fair on that whole thing. However, the perception was that Lisa Kearns was very close to Marianne, was a sort of Marianne ally, and that they were going to be a team together. So the fact to find Lisa kind of on the, as part of the awkward squad, if you like, is a surprise. And to an extent, you could probably put Shauna Stolte in the same bracket as unexpected. Right. You might have expected that Kelvin Galbraith from Ward 1 or Angela Bentavenia from Ward 6 would perhaps be more likely to team up with Paul Sharman as a kind of conservative, less anti-development kind of wing. So it's unusual to, the four that lined up with Marianne and the three that haven't are not who I would have predicted, that's for sure. So it's interesting. But I mean, this is a story that Marianne could have killed on day one with one line. And I mean, she won the vote. She didn't need to say anything. She won the vote. Show a bit of grace and move on. Mm-hmm. You don't need to say thank you to the councillors who helped me get this vote passed. End of story. Everybody's happy. You're not embarrassing anybody. But she didn't. They responded. That's fine. She made no response to their comment initially until it got into the Spectator. We see people read the Spectator, whereas they don't read councillors' letters in great quantities. So at this point, she's concerned because now people are actually seeing this story in something that has a serious readership. And I think it's the first time that she's really made a bad media call, I would say, and that we would not have covered this story if she hadn't responded. And now,
we've kind of followed it ourselves. We said, should we not? I don't want to do the he said, she said kind of, or she said, better back and forth. But the fact that it got into the spec and, I just thought it was a bad look. Like it's a bad strategy on her part to do it that way, I thought.
And what Joan Little reported is a matter of record. There's no great conspiracy here. It's out there. So yeah, it's for someone who has always been a very canny user of the media. I'm surprised she made the decision, and it's not a good one. It's that classic thing that politicians do, of getting defensive when people call them on stuff, and it never works well for them.
So what else we got?
So the Prime Minister was in Hamilton today, and in fact, we've had a couple of party leaders visiting in the last few days, and
it's almost as if there's talk of an election in the air. Yeah.
So now, Joel, you're on the record. There's going to be no election in this year. I'm sticking by that.
I am going to stick by that, and here's my rationale. You and I have said it before, and I think I'll stand by this. Whoever pulls the trigger on a federal election is toast. My bet is the federal Liberals are looking at themselves and thinking of David Peterson in Ontario, calling the election with minority because I'm riding high in the polls now. I'm going to get me my majority government, and I think they're going to say no. We're not going to do it. But they are pulling a page out of Stephen Harper's playbook by goading the opposition into pulling the trigger. So now that I led the groundwork. So what happened was today is Tuesday, July 20th. Today, the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, was in Hamilton to visit the Hamilton Mountain Mosque to talk about confronting Islamophobia in the country, as well as to address the attack that happened earlier in Ancaster, I believe. As well, and this is where you get into the election rumors, is he announced funding for affordable housing in the tune of 95 energy-efficient rental homes in Hamilton, which would be on... let's just see here. So it's converting the Royal Oak Dairy project at Barton and Victoria Avenue into these energy-efficient, affordable housing units that would be part of their promise to provide affordable housing across the country. Of course, the NDP came out with their election style counter message to that, which sparked this whole rumor of, we're going to an election in the fall. The feds are Justin Trudeau is going to trigger an election in the fall. I don't think so. I think he's goading the opposition to do that because he's going to say, I can keep doing this. I will go to Hamilton and make my announcement on affordable housing. I'm going to go to BC and make an announcement that they are finally going to be funding childcare to the tune of $10 a day or something like that. And then I believe the Nova Scotia, PEI, and a number of other provinces are jumping on board with a similar agreement. So there's all this stuff that's coming out that is being touted as, it's election fever. I think he's just doing it because he's like, I can. Yeah, you want to stop it? Go ahead. Trigger the election. And the Conservatives are... COVID is more popular than the Conservatives right now in the country. The NDP have had zero traction with Jagmeet Singh in the polls since, the last election. I think they're pretty much right where they were the last time. And my understanding is they still have a pretty hefty debt that they're still paying off. And the Green Party, the Green Party cannot, eat their own leader fast enough to save their life. So I'm looking at it, it's who's itching to go to the election? To go to an election right now. To me, if I was Justin Trudeau, I'd be like, why would I have an election? I can just do what I want to do. And who's going to stop me?
Yeah. It seems I'm not quite as confident as you, but I'm following the logic. Absolutely. There's if they want to call an election, fine, we'll go for it. Because we're probably in the best position. I saw him recover in the last election, which was the most poisonous, vile, nasty, pointless election in the history of the world. Yeah, Mike Moffat was commenting on Twitter today that, people are talking as if it's a slam dunk for the Liberals, and there's no such thing in Canada. I mean, I've learned that. I remember when I came here from Britain, and there was a electoral specialist back in Britain. He's like, if a party has a 3% lead or 3-point lead, going into an election in Britain, they've got it sewn up. You're never going to get a swing more than 3%. Well, over here, you get massive swings all the time. I mean, there's really not much party loyalty. You go out shopping and you think, I don't know, and you don't even think about who you're going to vote for until the writ drops. So there is huge risks associated with going early and being the one, and above all, being the one to make the election happen. I mean, yeah, you've mentioned people who've paid for that. I mean, since I've been in Canada, Mark Ignatieff is the one who stands out for me, who kind of pushed an election that no one really wanted. It didn't really seem like a particularly great time to do it. It started off with a disastrous speech, and everything went from bad to worse from there.
Well, I think the Conservatives are not going to push for one. They'll bluff and blow, but they're not going to push one for the simple fact that they were counting on a screwed up vaccine rollout. They were counting. If you remember, you had Michelle Rumpel and Aaron O'Toole coming out and saying to whoever would listen, and a lot of mainstream media picked up on this thread of, Trudeau screwed up the orders. Trudeau screwed up the orders. We're not going to have any vaccines in this country, and we're going to be completely behind all the countries. We're never going to get vaccinated. We're going to be dead last, and we're going to be locked down forever because Trudeau screwed up the order sheet or whatever. And then flash forward to today, we've surpassed the Americans in vaccinations. We have boatloads of vaccines on the shelf. We're giving it away to the third world because we're at risk of it going bad, which is good. But we are the vaccine rollout isn't the disaster that they were counting on it to be. And I think that they are. I'm sitting there going like, what is your criticism of Trudeau now? And I'm not saying that there isn't one, but let's face it, in an election, what is the, like, what's your message to the people? COVID should have been done better. Like, how? Legitimately, what could have been done better? Lots of money came out, and you say, oh, we're in debt now. Yeah, okay, we're in debt, but every other country's in debt now.
Well, and I don't see anybody winning an election going out there and saying, hey, remember that CERB payment you got? You should have got that.
Right.
I don't see that winning.
Or to go to stand in a restaurant with your backdrop behind you and say, yeah, you know what? That wage subsidy that we gave you to keep your place open, yeah, no, that was a bad idea. We should not have done that. So, I mean, it's the only real debate, which is not an election winning or losing debate, is not that we should have spent a crap ton of money, but how big of a crap ton. And yeah, it's a big crap ton of money that we spent. No two ways about that. But I mean, this is, we spent a crap ton of money in the Second World War. We spent a crap ton of money, various other crises during our history. Sometimes that's the way it goes. We're still here. We're still alive. The economy is still working. We'll survive. I mean, like the other note, I just thought of this, and I'm going to bring it up, that it kind of ticked me off, is the fact that this is, again, the note that the public, the mainstream media doesn't quite get the 905 region anymore, is that the Prime Minister comes to Hamilton and the 905 must mean we're going for election, because the only reason at all that the Prime Minister would want to come to Hamilton would be to hand over money to buy some votes in the city, because God knows there's no reason why a Prime Minister would ever want to visit Hamilton. And I said to my wife, maybe he's just bored of Ottawa. Maybe he's just like, I've been cooped up because of this pandemic in Ottawa for 2 years. I want to get out of here and stop staring at the same reporters' faces for every day. I want to see other Canadians out there. And yeah, he chose Hamilton. Why? Oh, I don't know, because it's one of Canada's largest cities. It's got a vibrant economy, and you know what? Maybe he's just like, I want to go visit Hamilton. Well, and you've got your former sort of star environment minister who's recently announced she's not running again, who's from Hamilton, who says they're not interested in running or anything, but is making some quite interesting noises about how much she loves Hamilton. There's the investment in the LRT, obviously, as well. I mean, I think that political parties as a whole are starting to show more faith in Hamilton. Maybe not in the council, but I feel that Hamilton is reaching a turning point, if it hasn't already reached it. And we're dealing with the hangover from the bad old days when we look at the council that's just seemingly hell-bent on just being stupid. This is why we can't get councillors to come on this podcast. Well, we haven't really tried that hard, but they're all welcome anytime. So there's that. And I'm sure there is a little bit of electioneering. I mean, there's a little bit of electioneering in anything any politician does ever. Every day, everything they do, they're thinking about votes. So just deal with that. That's just the way it is. So yeah, absolutely it is. But does it mean... I mean, this is the cycle this is the part of the electoral cycle anyway, where the parties turn from the bad news stuff you get done in your first 2 years to the good news stuff that you roll out in the second 2 years. That's the way they do it. So it's not unheard of that they'd be doing these announcements anyway. I mean, when the LRT announcement came, 3 months ago now? Yep. No one connected that to an election. Well, it could have been, so it's kind of wishful thinking, I think, on the part of the media, who get much more excited about this stuff than I do, I have to say. It goes into kind of what we've been saying since, episode 1, which, if listeners want to listen, by all means, start from the beginning, work your way down. But then, the mainstream media knows nothing about this region outside of an election cycle. They say, oh, if an important announcement comes into the region, it must be because an election is coming. Well, no, maybe because we're a vital part of the Canadian country, the Canadian psyche, and also, like Hamilton has need of major social housing. If you want to talk about a way to kind of inject money into it to really combat the homeless shortage or the housing shortage, this is a great way to do it. Honestly, I mean, 95 units. How many people can afford homes now? That's great news, and we kind of need more of that to be happening in this province across the across all the area codes.
Yeah, I mean the fact that this government has, when I say got far more serious than any other government in recent history about affordable housing, subsidized housing, housing projects in whatever form that are aimed at affordability and more than affordability. That's a big deal, and I think they deserve some credit for that. I mean, the other thing I'll say with regard to the whole electioneering thing is, if Justin Trudeau wants to get votes, he shouldn't be coming to Hamilton because you're in a fight with the NDP where you're not going to pick up much. The places he wants to be going is Brampton, Mississauga, North York, Markham. That's where you can take a bunch of Conservative seats and turn them Liberal. But I mean, that's the usual thing. The 905 is this kind of voter fodder thing, right? Isn't it? I mean, that's how the media sees us. It's like, oh, well, yeah, you only go to 905 because you want votes. The rest of the time, it's who cares? And I mean, we keep on talking about the fact that, well, certainly provincially, the provincial parties, none of the provincial parties talk about the issues that 905 people talk about every day, which is development, transportation. Well, I mean, they do talk about transportation. That's a little bit unfair, but there are huge issues with development, municipal planning that no party is even pretending to pay any attention to. And I don't get that when every person who lives here is thinking, is one way or the other kind of obsessed with that subject.
I that's kind of why I'm going to position myself as I'm the one ahead of the curve to say that I don't think there'll be an election. I don't see it because you're right. I mean, nothing about this strikes me as a plea for votes to get, we're going to provide social housing funding in the city.
And you know what? If they were to call an election, it's my great habit of giving advice to politicians with successful careers, coming from my position as someone who is a complete failure politically. However, my advice to the Prime Minister is, if you call an election, you better have a better bloody performance up your sleeve than you did last time, mate.
Oh, for crying! Yeah,
and not just with the offensive photographs from when you were a child of 30 plus, dressing up in blackface, but the just general tone that was appalling from the Conservatives, but it was appalling from the Liberals too, and the NDP were no better. It was a shocking election, and I've seen some real turkeys in my time.
Well, no, if you're right, if there's an election, this. I'll be honest. The last thing I want to see any gloating or whatnot. If there are more skeletons in Justin Trudeau's closet, which there very well could be, I do not know. Will it be enough for him to be defeated? I don't know. I really don't know. I don't think so. I don't think so, because I think Aaron O'Toole is just not that. He hasn't done a good enough job to make people like him. My understanding is he's polling even more real. The Conservatives are polling so badly that they risk losing more seats than when Andrew Scheer left them. So
I mean, let's face it. Andrew Scheer should never have got as close to being Prime Minister as he did. I mean, that was a disgrace that he got that close. I mean, the man was completely unqualified. It was testament to how badly the Liberals performed that he got there. It was the 905 that saved their skin. Remember, I mean, that was a truly awful election, and I've never been, as someone who's been involved. I was involved in that election in a minor way, in canvassing and helping out a party, which was in that particular point in time the Liberals. I've never been so disappointed in all the parties and reached sort of election day and felt at a national level, kind of a curse on all their houses.
Yeah, absolutely.
Seriously, this is what you're going to give to us.
And quite frankly, if that's what the Conservatives or the NDP are have up their sleeves for an election, to trigger an election, I think that's what we're gonna debate on. The country is not ready for that post-COVID. The country is just not wanting it at all. I don't want it. I don't want to be covering an election. What people want is to have hope in the fall that, you know what, at Thanksgiving, I'm gonna see my family around the table, and we're not going to be looking at each other cross-eyed or the side of our peripheral vision when one of us coughs or sneezes. That's what Canadians want for this fall. And then, to look at Christmas and say, I can't wait to see my family that I haven't seen in 2 years, friends that I haven't seen in 2 years. That's what I want. I don't give a crap about Aaron O'Toole or Pierre Poilievre or whoever trying to make a point about something that, just to make a point. Right now, I just want to get past COVID, and I want to live my life a little bit more freer than I have in the last 2 years, because God damn it, I have fucking earned it.
Yeah, absolutely. I second that. No one wants to be talking about these. Certainly nobody wants a lame election talking about nonsense, just toxic, vile stuff like we did last time. And that's down to all of them. It's easy to blame someone like Andrew Scheer, who goodness knows did not help.
But you're right. It was a pox in all their houses. And I'm going to leave off my comments by just saying, if any federal politician leader is listening to us by some dumb blind chance, do not pull an election. You will be eviscerated at the polls. I myself will probably just curse your name 100 times over, and I've got a podcast to do it. Don't pull an election. Nobody wants it. Let us live our lives COVID free for a little while. Then you can have your pissing match. Nobody wants it. Agreed.
I think we should leave it there. Thanks, everybody. We'll be back on Tuesday with another episode of the 905er. Bye for now.
That's it for this episode of the 905er. Thank you for listening. As always, you can send us your feedback, thoughts, and concerns, or ideas for future episodes to our email, info@905er.ca. We love to hear from you. You can help us keep the 905er going by financially supporting us through Patreon as well as PayPal. Visit us at 905er.ca and click on the support tab. As well, links are in the show notes for your convenience. Lastly, you can find us on social media. Search for _905er on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. So long for now. See you next time.
Looking to make the most out of this life and optimize your personal wellness? Then check out the Natural Man Podcast. Join me, host Mike C., as we explore all areas of human wellness, physical, mental, and emotional. Learn strategies to optimize your own well-being and be in the driver's seat of your own health. Remember, your doctor works for you. Learn biohacks, neurohacks, ways to improve sleep, and ways to optimize your body and your mind. Check us out on Apple, Spotify, the Fountain app, and at naturalmanpodcast.com.